Okay. So, hello, 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 beautiful people. And the people said, hello. And the people said, and the people
Hello.
said, hello. Gugu is part of the tribe now. She's part of the community. I think what people might not know is that you and I have had this conversation, and because technology was not on our side, we are recording for the second time. But I'm really not complaining because we had such a great conversation, and what you do is so beautiful and needs to be out there that I'm sure that this conversation is going to be just as great as the first one. So welcome to our Conscious Parenting platform. This is a series we call Conscious Parenting Combo Series. And the meaning and the purpose behind it is for us to have valuable lessons that we can share to for people to be able to learn, rethink, and do all that is when it comes to parenting, right? So we are the Conscious Parenting Convo series, and our main purpose is to help parents parent from a place of awareness so that they can better understand and support their children in their different stages of development. So in October, we are specifically focusing on the importance of parental involvement in children's education and overall development. And you speak directly to the education part, and I don't want to take all the information. I don't want to be giving all the information away. I want you to be the one to introduce yourself so that people can know how it is that you and I are having this conversation. So a warm welcome to you. And yeah, I hand over to you.
Well, thank you for having me again. So my name is Gugu. I'm a CA by profession and I've worked in financial services industry, and Shimali Publishing is a company that I started this year. And we publish flashcards in the different South African languages and Shona. And the main aim was really just to have an additional resource available to South African parents who are wanting to teach their language to children. So there's lots of material, there's books that you can use. But when I was going through the process of really like being more intentional about teaching the language in our household, I couldn't find flashcards. So I decided I'll then make the flashcards, and that's how Shimali came about.
All right. So for people who may not necessarily know what flashcards are, please tell us more about what flashcards are.
Okay, so flashcards are one of like the oldest ways in which to teach any concept essentially, and it works on memorization. So it works with a flashcard will usually have like a picture or a word or a phrase that you're wanting to teach. I have a copy for ours. So our ones will have the bilingual flashcards, so they'll have the language that you're wanting to teach and the English translation, and then at the back of them it will show you which language it is. And we made it in this way because most of the parents, even ourselves as well, the kids already understand the English, but it's now trying to bring in the vernac or whatever the home language is. So that's why we designed them in this way. So, and it also appeals to a different age group as well. So if you're teaching younger kids, you'll focus more on the picture and sounding the word ipubesi, which is a line in isiZulu, and they'll recognize the picture and remember the word. And as the kids get older as well, then they learn to read. They learn to read the word, and it's basically just a way to introduce a language. So for our sets, our first two sets are the fruits and the animals. So fruits is easy to introduce within the household. You have apples and bananas, and like most fruit. Hopefully, your children are eating fruit, and it's just introducing it in that way. That it's an apple in English, but ngesiZulu i-apula, and then you'll go on in that manner, like teaching the fruit. So it's just a gateway into starting the conversations and bringing whole languages back into the.
So you mentioned that you how it started this year. So I want to ask you why bilingual language in the first place? You could have chosen any other thing, I'd imagine. Why was it important for you to introduce the different types of languages?
So at first, it obviously I kept in our household we are Zulu and Sotho speaking, so I wanted to make sure that those two languages are definitely covered. But with speaking with my friends as well, most couples are like in intercultural relationships now, like you gender and you're married to a Zulu man, and so there's multiple languages within the household, and they were also having the same struggle of finding ways in which to introduce both languages into the household, and then finding creative resources that could start. So there's books, like Ethnic Kids has so many books available that you can use at story time, and there's workbooks that are available that you can use if your kids are into workbooks. Flashcards is just another element in another way in which you can use to introduce languages. And I preferred flashcards because they're portable. You can gamify them in so many ways. You can take them with you when you go on your little school run. As well, you can make it for game nights. There's really so many ways that you can use flashcards to introduce the language into the household that covers all kids, small and older ones.
Yeah, so you mentioned game cards. I think the question I wanted to ask you was, does it also make it fun to introduce the language, not only for the child, but for the parent as well? Does it make it easier because it's not so heavy as a textbook?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Because I think the challenge with teaching kids anything, whether it's financial literacy or any a language in this case, is trying to find ways in which you can introduce something and it doesn't feel like it's extra homework. Like, oh, I'm coming home now, Mama's going to whip out the workbook and we're learning. Like it's school after school. So flashcards we found have been such an easy way in which to almost like seamlessly introduce language without making it feel like it's heavy. So, for example, you can choose one flashcard for the week, which is the word that you're going to teach. So in our household, we'll use two. So isiZulu and Sesotho will be the two. So it'll be the Ipubesi and Itao for the Sesotho will be the two words that we're introducing for the week, and then you just stick them up on the fridge as an example, and then everybody knows these are the two words, and then you'll try and slip it into conversations when you're driving to school or just sitting around like, oh, what sound does a lion make, or what sound does Ipubesi make, what sound does Itao make, like things like that, so that they can get used to the word. And then also even when you go to the zoo, Joburg has so many. There's like this one zoo in Midrand that we took our kids and when we introduced her to the lion, so she could see Ipubesi. This is Ipubesi that we've been teaching her. So I found it's an easier way to introduce language where it's not also just restricted to you sitting with the book with your child. You can take it with in the car. We'd also play I Spy with My Little Eye, and then you'll describe a lion. It's very loud. It's the king of the jungle. It makes the sound, whatever it is. And then the kids will guess, and then I'll say no, but you must say it in Sesotho, and then they'll guess and guess and guess until they get it right. So it's really we found it's really a nice way to introduce a fun way of learning as well.
It sounds to me like it's really interactive. So both parties would really need to come to the party. So does it work on the relationship in terms of building a strong bond between parent and child?
Oh, definitely. Because also with language, you are the holder of the knowledge and you have to impart it to the child. So you have to be involved in any case. And then also even within like the couples in a household, because for some people, I'm Zulu speaking, my husband's Sotho speaking. So I'm teaching the kids Sotho, but some of the words I may not be pronouncing correctly. So then he also needs to get involved and then explain how to pronounce this word, etc. So it's a good way for parent and child to find time together, and also you and your intercultural partner as well, to learn each other's languages, because that's some of the feedback that we've received as well, is that oh wow, like even my husband also, he didn't know some of the Sesotho words, like were what they are. So we've been getting feedback about, as I'm teaching my child, I'm also learning new ways about my own language and myself as well. I also didn't know what a watermelon was, because we never used to call it ikabe in our household. But going through this whole process has been a learning for all children and also the adults.
So it's even great in the sense that it becomes for everyone and not necessarily just whoever has taken up the role of teaching the child. So I'd imagine if, it's a household of, two parents, I'd imagine the other parent would also need to participate or keep abreast of where the child is so that we can all move together and the one doesn't get left behind.
Yeah, for sure. Because when
Okay.
teaching language, I think the what helps with the whole process is if everyone is involved, as with all parenting, but particularly with language, especially because most people are in households where it's become an English speaking household. So if you've taken this, if you've if you're now intentional about, okay, we're wanting to teach our children the language and we're wanting to expose them more, like both of you also have to come to the party and start speaking the language that you're wanting to introduce. So it's definitely involvement from the parents, the auntie who's looking after the children as well. Like everybody needs to understand, okay, this is what we're trying to push our family to, so everybody needs to be involved.
So you touched on the fact that most households now are English speaking. So from your perspective and all the research that you've done, and what have you found the reason to be? Is it because we are not embracing of our own languages, or is there something else that's at play?
Yeah, it's definitely, from my research, it's definitely been a change in exposure. So, for example, compare our generation, we grew up where we went to school like later on, maybe just the grade before you go to grade 1. So you're in the household, in a whatever your home language is, like for long. You're exposed to the language for longer periods. And back then, we didn't have many options. You were watching cartoons in your own language. I think there was a time where if you wanted to listen to a cartoon in English, you had to tune on to like Radio 2000 or something so that you can get the English version. But the point is, you were exposed to your language for a longer period. Whereas if you compare to our kids now, they're going to preschool at like 18 months because we're working, or we don't live close to our parents anymore who could have watched us like we were watched by Gogo, whoever, or whichever aunt or uncle was not working at the time. So our kids are exposed to English sooner. There's so many TV channels and cartoons all in English. You're driving them to school, you're listening to the radio all in English. You're living in neighborhoods with people who also who no longer look like you, so they're also speaking English. So it's the amount of exposure that our kids have to English that ends up being the dominant language, and the home languages are not so strong anymore. So I don't think it's that we're not focusing on them so much. It's just that we're really fighting against a bigger system where English is predominant. And if you wanting your kids to learn whatever your home language is, you really have to come out guns blazing and be intentional, because when they leave the household, then it's English again.
So with that said, how many times would a child need to be exposed to the flashcards before they start grasping the concept, whether be it the apples or the animals?
So it's child dependent and also on age. Like for example, our smallest one is like 20 months. So with her, we'll spend like a little more time like introducing the word, and then you'll open National Geographics or whatever animal channels are around to try and find the animal. Even on YouTube, you bring up the lion so that you can, so that it sticks in her mind. And then also we've found in other times where it's the pronunciation is hard for the older kids, then we'll spend a little bit more time. So I would recommend maybe a week with a word or whatever words. And then if your kids are picking it up, then you can move on to the next words. And then also it's supplementing like flashcards. You say you're learning about animals with the flashcards and whatnot. And then when you do your bedtime story, you're reading an isiZulu book with animals, and then they can recognize, oh, that's the word you taught me. So essentially an introduction, but you really have to beef it up with whether it's taking them to a zoo, or when they're eating, reminding them this is what I've taught you, or watching a channel or whatnot, or just having conversation. So it's child dependent and also age. Like you'll gauge with your kids how fast they're grasping.
So it sounds Oh, okay. So sorry to cut you. So it sounds to be quite flexible as well. So it's not a thing to say a child must sit down and it must be that time, that maybe 10, 20 minutes where a child is sitting down by the table and is doing the reading the flashcards. Is it a matter of, like you said, you can put it on the fridge, you can drive with it. So whilst you're driving, you can pull out the cards. So it's quite flexible. With that said, has it been easy? Are you finding that parents are finding it easy for them to incorporate the flashcards with everything else that's happening? I mean, we've already mentioned that our kids are going to school, so and we are working. Is it easy for us to incorporate the flashcards within the lifestyle?
Yeah, so the feedback we've received is it's definitely helped and made it easier because it's not, you can almost like limit the content as well. So if you sit with the book, you have to finish the book.
Okay.
You can't just like stop. Whereas now it's those little pockets of time where you do get and your child is free, then you can like slip it in. So it's definitely been easy, especially for like working parents, and like one word a week, and also it's just the encouragement of once you start hearing more words in your language, then you'll ask, like, we may not have all the animals, and then suddenly they'll ask, oh, but what's a giraffe? And then that's an opportunity for you as a parent then to also like teach them what you know, if hopefully you know what a giraffe is in your language. So it's really just a gate opener for parents who are wanting to start the journey, and you have to add on other things like your books, when you go to school, switching to a radio station of your language so they can start hearing the words. And children are naturally inquisitive as well. Like, oh, what did she say? Or if you can find cartoons on YouTube or wherever you're able to in your language as well, and how like sit down and watch those with you, and then I'll ask you questions. Oh, but what does that word mean? So it's really a conversation starter, and it's because it's really simple. Like you can introduce one word at a time. It's easier to slip into our busy schedules.
Oh, okay. So in terms of, so are you personally, like as Shimali, your focus at this point, is it just on the introduction, so meaning the basics, or do you have more in store?
Yeah. So initially it was just to introduce like the basics, like animals, days, months, weeks of the season, the body. And then with feedback now, that which has also been like shocking for us as well, we've received so much feedback where parents have been saying, what if you actually like branched out and it could be more words about how to have a conversation, like what is hello, goodbye, like how are you, like how do you do things, how do you say things like that in different languages. And that's feedback that's come mostly from parents who have had interracial adoptions where they're learning the adoptive child's language with them as well. So it's something we've considered, and we're definitely working on expanding, where we thought it would just really be an introductory, but it seems like there's an actual need for more, or like to expand on the conversation as well, other than just introducing themes and concepts.
Yes, no, I'm really glad that you had people who reached out to ask for more, because I mean, we once it gets to the point where they know the introductory stuff, then it becomes a thing of, okay, what happens next? And I think what's great with you is that you literally take us from the basics to having us get to a point where we can have the conversation. So I really hope that you will be successful in your expansion in that part, in that sense, because we are people who engage and we conversate. So it can't just be, just apple and then, what about the apple? So it would be nice to have that overall experience at one place. So I think I want to ask you, for you, what is it that you want for it? I know people are reaching out. So as they say to you, okay, do more in this sense, how are you receiving that feedback? Is it something that excites you, or is it something that scares you? Where are you as you receive the feedback?
It's exciting and scary, because I think initially it was really just let me help other moms who are going through.
Mm.
Yeah, and it'll end there. So it's really exciting that we're going to be expanding our range and going into a different side that I wouldn't have thought of. And where I would like Shimali to go really is just to be one of the gateways in which to help parents in introducing languages in their household. So that in speaking with parents, it seems like if people have gotten to a point where they're despondent, where you in a household where you both speak different languages and you've defaulted to English because it's just been easier, and now your kids have picked up English and you're thinking, oh goodness, it's going to be so hard now to try and introduce the language, and then you go on in that way. And then I also know, myself included, when we have one of my daughters is like that, where she picked up English sooner because we sent her to school sooner, before our oldest son. So she's that child who speaks English even though we speak vernac to her. So even that's like hard for some parents. And I'm trying, but she's just not responding. And what I want to say to those parents is just keep going. Use the resources, the flashcards, the books, whatever is available. Just keep using them, and you'd be surprised how much they're able to absorb. Rather than just calling it quits and thinking, she's already speaking English, let me not do it. Hopefully resources like ourselves could help you start the journey and trust the process, that whatever you are instilling in your kids will come out, even though you may not see the fruits now. They'll surprise you later and with how much they've been able to absorb.
Yeah, so have you been able to receive feedback from your kids as well to say, Mommy, this has helped me in this way? Or is the feedback from your kids just by surprise, where you hear them now speaking the language that you've been trying for the longest of times to teach them?
Yeah, so we've been lucky to be, because our kids are like different, quite a big age gap at the top and the bottom. So with our youngest, she's recognizing words. Like she'll see Ipubesi on the screen. And I know, like the MacBooks sometimes have those screensavers, and there's a line, and then she's like, oh, Ipubesi. So it's like, oh, she's learning, like that. And then with our oldest daughter, who responds in English to our Zulu speaking. Like one day she said to me, Mama, ngicela isingwa. And I was like, so surprised, but I don't want to act surprised, so like it shock her. And then next time she thinks, oh, I'm not going to speak Zulu to this woman. So it's like, it's working. It's just like with parenting, I think they always say parenting is a thankless job. Like you'll never know what your investment is until later on. So yeah, that's the feedback we've received, is that it's working, even though they won't come and say, you know what, Mama, I'm learning a lot. You'll just see it in words. Like they'll start, instead of calling and like, oh, I want to go grab an apple, then they'll say, oh, I'm going to fetch iapula. Like, even though it's still, the sentence is still in English, but that word that you taught has now, has like transferred to now them referencing in isiZulu or whatever the language is.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like no matter what level, there would need to be some form or sort of patience from the parents' side, because introducing something new doesn't happen overnight. And we as parents have a tendency of expecting immediate results. So we would need to practice some patience. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Practice patience. Involve everyone in the household. Like, tell, if you have a nanny or whoever stays with your kids, like also tell them, you know what, we're trying to make the kids speak more of the language. Don't respond to them back in English. And that's the thing. Even your friends, when they come over and they greet your kids, like tell them, no, Zulu this time. So don't speak to them in English. And then also taking them home, if you have that option, where they can go see their grandparents and their siblings and cousins who don't speak English all the time, like for them to hear the language. So yeah, I think it's patience and involving your village.
Yes. Oh, yes. So for me personally, in our household, we've got a 4-year-old. And yes, like you mentioned, the exposure part is the one that really makes it a little bit tricky in terms of finding the balance between English and the the home language, and depending as well as to whether or not you are speaking the same language with your partner. So I am Ndebele, so ngili Ndebele, and then my husband yena ke Motswana. So even between the two of us, we speak English, and we obviously we've brought her up to speak English, and she's exposed, she's going to a school that speaks English predominantly. So but sometimes I found that when we, my husband and I, when we speak Setswana or speak Isindebele, we find that she would pick it up, and even though it doesn't make sense, but she would sound different. She would want to make a different sentence that sounds different from English. And so I think as well, between, like you say, it is a village, but also the responding part. So I thought about maybe that would be a great way to start introducing or incorporating the home language, because I was like, okay, she's at a point where now she pretty much knows most instructions in English, and she communicates in English. So maybe now the best way in which we can do for ourselves, the best way in which we can go about introducing our home language, it would be to now start responding in a different language. But I wasn't sure if that was actually going to work. So I think this conversation between you and I is reassuring. But also I will be adding flashcards, and I hope our conscious parents on this platform will also incorporate flashcards. So what is the process like actually of going through of creating a flashcard? Because it looks really beautiful. The aesthetics look really beautiful. Does that really matter as you create the flashcards? Because as I understand it, kids respond to beautiful things or things that catch their eyes. Do you take this in mind as you create the flashcards?
Yes, that's definitely something I considered as well when I was designing the flashcards, because when I was looking for resources and I was trying to find ways in which I could introduce the stuff that related to vernac languages, which was just so dull, and the animals look sad, everything's dusty, like Benny and Betty age stuff. So that was really important for me, because that also helped with keeping the engagement, especially with younger kids as well. Like if they are going to be learning by recognizing the picture better be captivating. And also now our kids play Fortnite, so they know what bad graphics look like. My kids are always, these are bad graphics. So that's also an element that you need to consider, is that if you're wanting kids to be involved and engaged in whatever you're teaching them, it needs to catch their eye before they start listening to what you're saying. So that's really important to make sure that the illustrations are really good and captivating.
Okay, so for you, how long does it take for you? Is it an intense process for you to create the flashcards, or are you at that point where you now it's all systems go for you? And I'm asking from the perspective of a parent. I mean, you already have other responsibilities, and now you're a mompreneur. How are you finding the balance between the two?
So this has been actually like a 2-year process. So which it's been challenging, but it's been fun. So from just figuring out like how we were going to design the flashcard so that it could encompass all the languages. Like were we going to put the language in the front of the card or the back of the card, and then also even the print, like the paper that you're going to use. Are you going to use encapsulation or laminate? So it's been a 2-year process. We've had so many different runs of and working with different printing companies. Like, the paper is not right. Because also what was important is that it had to have round corners so that kids don't cut themselves, and then it also had to be laminated so that when the sticky fingers come, you can just wipe it off with the wipe, and it's easy. So it's been a very exciting process for me, because I was predominantly working in a finance environment. So from choosing the boxes, the little bags that the cards come in, the design, the font as well, because that's also a thing. There's specific fonts that are better for teaching that kids use to remember. So researching all of that. So all in all, I would say it was a 2-year journey. So we've so everything's been designed and translated, and also finding good translators. We had like a bit of issues with those. So everything's been translated. We've got our rollout plan of which sets are coming out when, which was very important for me because I still wanted to keep my day job as well. So that's what makes it easier for me. So it's really a matter of, okay, these sets are supposed to go out on this day, and then you just send the hard copy off to the printers, and then print and ship it back and load it up. I learned how to update my own website, so it's easy. You can just put the stock up as soon as you get it. So it's been a 2 year long journey in preparation of the next year of rollout for Shimali.
Okay, no, it sounds amazing. I think you and I, in terms of our time, I want to appreciate you for availing yourself to take us through the process and answering all the questions that I've posed to you. I've really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I want to make sure that our people as well get to you should they wish to reach out to you. So maybe just before we close, how exactly can people get a hold of you? And maybe maybe say it twice so that people don't miss out the information.
Cool. So we are available. We are available on Instagram and Facebook at Shimali_publishing, and we also, all our sets are available at our online store, which is shimali.co.za. And we also, our flashcards are also stocked on Ethnic Kids, which is an online bookstore. So go on there to also get all the other languages to supplement the flashcards as well for your bedtime reading. And we also have our isiZulu, isiXhosa, and isiSotho flashcards are available at Book Circle Capital, which is a physical bookstore in Melville, Johannesburg.
Okay, so I heard quite a number of online stores. Can you kindly just repeat those for me? So you mentioned Ethnic Kids, and what's the other one?
So it's be available on our own store, which is shimali.co.za. This is all the sets, all the languages. And then Ethnic Kids Africa has a couple of the languages. I think about 4 or 5 of the languages are stocked on there. And then if you're looking for a physical store, our sets for isiZulu, Sesotho, and isiXhosa are available at Book Circle Capital, which is a bookstore in Melville in 27 Park.
Okay, look, our time. I'm inspired. I'm inspired as a parent to go that extra mile to make sure that we actually get her to ultimately get to a point where she speaks one of our languages, if not both, because it sounds to me like it's dependent on the child. So you can introduce 2 languages. So we'll be doing isiNdebele and we will be doing Setswana. I know that you mentioned that you cover most of the languages, so people will be able to get their languages. I appreciate you so much for making the time. I wish you all of the very best. And what else can we look out for, or what message do you have for our parents just before we close?
Thank you for having me. I also love the work that you're doing, reminding us to be conscious parents, and teaching kids language is a decision to be a conscious parent and transfer your language. So the message that I have for parents is just start and keep going, even though you're not seeing the fruits of your labor yet. It'll eventually come around, because language, I think we think it's just a matter of speaking with each other, but language is like such a deeply personal and free resource that you can transfer to your kids. And if you think about just generationally, if you are the last in your generation to understand the language, if you're raising kids who don't know, they're also going to raise kids who speak English, and that's the end of your language, as somber as that sounds. But it's really, for us, we are the custodians of the language. So teach your children what you know, and it really is free. Like the resources that we make and the books that are available, it's really to help with raising the modern child, who that's how they learn in school. But the most basic part is just speak the language in the household, and the more they hear it, they're naturally inquisitive. They'll ask you the questions, Mama, what do you mean? And then you'll explain again in your language, this is what it means. So it's just start the dialogue with just yourself speaking before you even start trying to get other resources as well. Like it doesn't have to be such a big endeavor.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. With that, I hope every parent will be left inspired to do exactly as you have said. I thank you once again, and I look forward to continuing this conversation on the other side of this. Thank you for now, and take care.
Cheers. Bye. Okay, so I missed.